It is my pleasure now to transition now with our last masterclass of the day, which will end abruptly right when we start the main stage, to talk about what we've called up-and-coming hotel sustainability champions. So I'd like to invite to the panel our three masterclassors. We have Shankar Sreekumar, Vice President of Operations from ONYX Hospitality Group; Matawee Mujchapan, Operations Manager for Environmental Sustainability at Centara; and we have Iris Lam, Director of F&B from Mandarin Hotel Group. So I want to welcome our panelists first, and then we will turn it over and give a chance for Shankar, then to Iris, then Nim, to speak a little bit about your respective organizations. As a preface, I wanted to just give a background on this session. Is we see so much movement right now in the smaller hotel company that is growing. We have a lot of hotel companies in this region that have big pipelines, that have recently taken big steps in sustainability, and have faced sort of similar challenges, but have really interesting stories and anecdotes about how sustainability is managed across their organization. So we're very lucky to have these three panelists representing three very established companies, but who we are calling up and coming, because normally when we hear corporate sustainability, we tend to think of the larger hotel chains or larger companies, big Fortune 500 multinationals. But the most interesting things I think are happening in these size of hotel companies. And so my pleasure to have some presentations so each panelist can give some insight to their organization and how sustainability is managed in different aspects. Then we'll wrap it up in about 10 minutes with some Q&A and discussion, and then open up and transition to the main session. So thank you all. And first, my pleasure to welcome Shankar. Please take it away.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for having me on the panel. I'm going to click on the share because I have a few slides. Please let me know if you can see it. Can you? Just checking, Eric, you can see the slide?
Yeah, there's a delay under the main stage, so we're still waiting for it to pop up. I think there we go. We're getting there. Yeah, 1 second here. There's a little bit of a delay, but yes, they can see it.
Good to go?
Yes, good to go. Take
Wonderful. Again, thank you for having me. Obviously, the core discussion topic for this session is about corporate sustainability for up-and-coming hotels. And I just thought I'll give you a bit of a picture in terms of where we are from an industry perspective. What is the reality check that we need to have, very similar to Bill's style on getting, coming to Jesus realization, I suppose. Then I will take you through some of the key initiatives that we in ONYX Hospitality Group are doing. And then I will close it with the difference between exactly what we do as an emerging brand compared to some of the big corporates. So just a few pointers in terms of where our industry or where the world is at the moment. So by the turn of the century, the scientists predict that there is going to be an increase in 4 degrees of global warming. That is a reality that we are staring at. That is what all the major multinationals, corporates, the world is actually looking at in terms of the impact it's going to have all across the globe. Now, how does that look at in terms of travel and tourism industry? So at this point in time, what we have seen since the 1990s, or I suppose the 2000s, there has been an unprecedented growth in travel. And if you look at this graph from 2010 to 2030, which is 2 decades, we are going to double the travel volume. Now, this includes every single aspect of corporate, leisure, short-haul, long-haul travel. And I know we live in a world of COVID at the moment, but even in the hospitality sector and the aviation industry, even though the dip has happened, I suppose the volume of travel across the globe is going to be significantly growing. And this one shows about double, maybe we'll probably do about 80% growth, which is a large volume, which is a large impact of emissions into the planet. Then we look at our industry. So our industry, out of the overall emissions, equates to about 8%. And this includes travel, tourism, logistics, transportation, everything to do with hospitality and tourism sector, which is a big amount. We've got buildings, we've got transportation, we've got logistics that move within countries, inter countries, and the reality is that that's a big number that we actually are staring at, and every single one of us is actually accountable for. Then we look at the hotel industry specifically. The hotel industry accounts to about 1% of the global emissions, with all the what I would call the previous stalwarts of big box hotels, the 400, 500 keys, and now the emerging small scale hotels, the mid-scale hotels, which are, might I add, from a design perspective, very efficient. But overall, if you look at it, we actually contribute to 1% of all the emissions across the travel industry. And then we look at some stats on rooms. So it is said that about 5 to 15 tons of CO2 emissions come per bedroom per year. Of course, this stat is across branded, unbranded, and even the lodging sector. But when you look at 5 to 15 tons of CO2 emission per bedroom per year, it's a significant amount. And I think what we are focusing on at the moment in terms of what we need to do at the pace at which we need to do does not really correlate to the emissions that are coming out of every single bedroom in every single hotel. And then finally, some target, right? For the hospitality industry, we must reduce 66% of our emissions by 2030, which really is 10 years away, which is a blip in terms of the larger scheme of things. And we need to reduce our emissions by 90% by 2050 to stay within the 2-degree threshold that has been given globally to all the countries. So I wanted to set the stage, open it up to give you a bit of an understanding of the volume, the impact, and the reality that we are staring at, right from an industry all the way down to a hotel room and all the way down to what all of us as hospitality industry leaders are accountable for. Now I'll share with you some consumer insights. Previously, luxury and travel and experiential travel was high on the agenda for the people who were traveling. When we look at what people want, and this is the report that came from bookings.com, again, just to set the platform, people are moving away from not caring to actually having an experiential travel, but also caring about the planet, also caring about the ecology. So 68% of the people are more likely to choose an eco-friendly accommodation or an accommodation branded or unbranded, but is associated with some form of eco in it. They also would like to consider themselves as a sustainable traveler. So today, with the younger generation, the millennials and the new people who are far more connected socially and have a bigger voice at the table, are also leaning towards ensuring that they actually are a sustainable traveler. Their core values, irrespective of the money they spend, they'd like to see and be associated with more of initiatives that are helping to save the planet. Around 38 to 40% also want to invest in locally made products and to support the local community focus, community uplifting, and focusing on the underprivileged or the handicraft industry of any particular country, especially in Asia, is a huge focus in terms of people who are actually traveling at the moment. A little bit more in terms of the actual tangible items. Guests are more happy with energy-saving light bulbs. I know that energy-saving light bulbs from an asset management perspective, coming from an operator, is a bit more of a cost. But really, if it is articulated in a manner through all our channels, it actually resonates with what the guests stand for. Guests actually are more aware and are starting to understand how the efficiency of a hotel runs, whether it is in terms of the dimmers in the room, whether it is sensor controls, or whether it is the actual flow of the water that comes out, whether it is a controlled flow of the water. People are becoming more and more aware and more accepting of that. They're also being more and more aware of not increasing or rather reducing waste. more and more guests who have a longer length of stay in our properties are more tuned to give the feedback that they don't need their linen changed frequently. They don't need their toiletries to be replaced as frequently as it used to be. Previously, there used to be an era that hospitality industry went through where people would actually collect a lot of these things just to keep it as a souvenir, etc. But now people are actually wanting to give it back and say that please do not change it as frequently as we used to, because I'd like to use it up until the last drop. And I think that's a great mindset that our consumers are asking for. And lastly, more and more guests from a food and beverage perspective, apart from the local dining experience, are also looking for locally created produce. And if there is something that comes along with the fact that it is a proactive approach to create the produce to keep the ecosystem within the hotel going, that is far more closer to the heart of consumers when they make a booking. So that was kind of setting the scene of where the industry is, where our consumers are asking for. Now to give you a bit of an insight into what we at ONYX Hospitality Group look at our environmental management. So we have a green vision. Really, if I look at and I speak to my counterparts and colleagues in the industry, everyone really is doing the same core aspect of what we are doing. We focus on energy saving. Energy is a huge thing from an energy efficiency perspective to an emission perspective. It is huge on the agenda of a lot of hotels, so we are no different. Water is a resource that is depleting, and water is going to be much like climate change, much like the degrees of heat that is going to increase year on year. Water, in my opinion, is going to be the core focus moving into the next decades. So we want to make sure that we keep that as a core of what we want to do in terms of conservation of water. And the third one is waste management. It's very simple. There is a lot of waste that happens in all the industries at the moment. The consciousness of controlling waste, I don't think has really hit hard to people yet. But, you know, credit where credit is due. A lot of companies are actually investing in renewable and recyclable goods and services. And one of the core focus that we do also is from a waste management perspective. The underlying thread that stitches all of these three together is also for us to be connected to our community. We come from a very deep-rooted Thai culture, which is about community, which is about looking after your own. And we want to make sure that a company like us, who is a Thai company now going global, we want to impart this culture into all the other countries that we are expanding into. So connected to the community is very, very close to us. So this is the core pillar in terms of what ONYX stands for. A bit of an insight into energy saving, just to keep it tangible for everyone in terms of some ideas and some initiatives that we actually are really implementing in our properties. Obviously, use of efficient use of cooling towers and cooling units is a big agenda on our items. The chillers, the boilers, the plants, the MEP, the mechanical engineering and plumbing accounts to a significant amount of expense on a hotel, significant amount of expense on cash flow, and they are the ones who actually account also to a lot of the emissions that come out of a hotel. So our focus is to ensure that wherever possible, either periodically or through CapEx, we want to make sure we invest in that, because if the structure is sound, then we can ensure that our corporate responsibility from an asset perspective is sound. Obviously, we are also looking at occupancy-based initiatives. So whether it is lighting fixtures or whether it is your water control units, it is important that more and more of our properties are investing actually in initiatives that actually control themselves in an automated way based on the occupancy fluctuation. And then, of course, the design. So we are 52 properties. We are going on to our ambition of 99 by 2024, which means there is a significant pipeline and beyond that. So one of the key focus that we have done as a strategy, working along with our development team and our technical service team, is to ensure that, much like any other company as well, is to ensure that the design that we go into properties moving forward is something that's efficient. The management agreement contracts with third-party operators, whether it comes to lifts or chillers or boilers, how do we use the solar energy directly and or the orientation of buildings so that we use the heat that gets produced from the windows of rooms right through to the pressure that it puts on aircon units is sound. Because these are some of the things that we, going back 20, 30 years ago, was never looked at, but it's important that they come into the design element of it as and when we move forward. Water as a resource is huge for us. Water treatment and the water treatment plants is a focus for us to invest in. Cooling towers are a huge focus for us to invest in. And how do we manage secondary treated water back into our hotels, whether it is for condensation or any other aspect of it, is something that we are heavily investing in purely from a corporate perspective. We have city properties and island properties. The island properties are far more stretched in terms of although it's a bit of a double-edged sword. They're surrounded by water, but the access and availability of water on the island actually is far more weighted as opposed to a city property where it comes from a council. So there is a lot of initiatives that we do in the island properties to ensure that as and when possible, there are the right filtration plants that are put in place to be able to make them self-sustaining to a certain percentage of the water consumption that we have in the island. A huge focus has gone across our hotels in terms of our laundry management, because laundry and the towel and the linen consumes a lot, whether it is to do with the number of minutes that each load gets washed, or whether it is to do with the number of load that goes actually into the laundry. We are working very closely with our company who has got a laundry partnership within our conglomerate to understand how the entire laundry function can be made far more efficient, at least to our equity properties. And then, of course, we will open it up to other hotels as well. But laundry and linen from an F&B and rooms perspective is a huge consumer of water and something that we want to focus on heavily moving forward. The last aspect, obviously, is waste management. Plastic is the mantra at the moment. All the major chains are going into volume and bulk for plastic, something that we have also adapted. Our aim for from Q1 next year is for all our properties to have no single-use amenities, at least in our equity properties. And that's something we are on track for. But apart from that, also more use of glass bottles from an F&B perspective. It's very, very important because plastic waste is growing at a rate that is almost becoming uncontrollable at the moment. And it's something that we want to take the bull by the horns and make sure that at least whatever we can do from our perspective, whether it is amenities, I mean, our ideal scenario and the target that we have given ourselves is that we want our bedroom to be completely plastic free by 2024, which means all our minibar, all our amenities, all our in-room collateral, everything has to be plastic free, which is a huge transition to make considering the cash flow constraint we have at the moment, but we still hope to keep that focus on. And we are gradually making that transition as we speak. Food waste in our resort and I would say isolated properties, which has to be self-sustaining, is huge for us. I just dialed into the previous session and we were talking about the farm to the table, and I heard some notes about the fact of having a chef's garden is something that we have absolutely invested and initiated in. And also we want to make sure that the waste management doesn't stick to our hotels, but wherever possible, we actually take waste management into our communities as well. So wherever possible, we sponsor a lot of initiatives which is focused on waste management. So energy, water, and waste is the core founding pillar of our green initiative. It's something that we are well underway in terms of focusing on. And lastly, as I said, the undercurrent of all of this is to be more socially responsible in our community. It's a culture we want to promote. And from a community perspective, we obviously work very closely with a group called PHIST. PHIST is run by a couple who take underprivileged kids who are whose family cannot sustain themselves, and they put them through a year of practical training program, and we guarantee their inclusion into our hotels at the end of the program, at least for a 6-month period, and then we grow them into a full-time role into our rank and file. So we are very, very closely associated with this initiative, which then obviously also works very similar to our responsibility to the community as well. So I suppose that was a bit of a holistic overview of what we do. And the last thing I want to leave with before I talk about asset management and owner engagement is from a procurement perspective, we have a corporate procurement team, and we have actually written down, chalked down from working with suppliers and working with operators on a basic platform of procurement. And apart from the fact that procurement traditionally only used to work in terms of negotiations at the best price point, we have actually included environment, sustainability, and efficiency into our negotiated procurement deals. So everything that we go into procurement with will put these three lenses, apart from the best deal possible, into a decision that needs to be made for procurement. So that kind of wraps up in a nutshell in terms of what we do as a group. And from a in my closing statement, the difference between up-and-coming chains to the corporate chains, we are asset owners as well. So what we generally do is we've got equity properties where we own, and everything that we do from a decision-making perspective becomes far more easier to explain to our owners when we actually make decisions for sustainability initiatives. And because we do that, and because we have tangible examples, we then make sure that it becomes easier for us to talk to our managed owners accordingly as well.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Shankar. And it looks like you dropped out for a second. That's okay. We'll have you back on in a second. That was a great introduction to the topic and the tangible things that you do in the organization. Also thought it was very interesting how you liaise with development technical services, and you have interactions across all of the types of hotels and geographies. Now, to dive a little deeper into this, I want to turn over to Iris Lam, Director of F&B and Sustainability at Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group. And Iris, I know you've embarked on some very interesting initiatives lately, and especially the way that you want to take them in your organization. So I would like to turn over to you to please let us know how you approach it within Mandarin Oriental.
Sure. Thanks so much, Eric. And hi, everyone. I'm Iris Lam, and as Eric introduced, I'm from Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, as we like to call it, short MO, and I'm also a member of the corporate F&B division. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with all of you today and have this great opportunity to share an overview of our sustainability journey at Mandarin Oriental and how we've applied that across to our global food and beverage operations. And most importantly, I want to share some successes as well as challenges that we've faced along the way, with the hope that you walk away from today's sessions with some key ideas on how to approach and mobilize sustainable action, as well as foster this culture of sustainability within your own organizations, particularly for smaller growing hotel chains in terms of size that are endeavoring to enter the space. So at this point, I just want to quickly check with the organizers that my presentation is on screen.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. I might need to ask for your assistance to pop it over from your side. Sorry to have to break in there with a little bit of a technical difficulty on my end.
Right now,
but I'll
share.
I'll continue on with just explaining a little bit about Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group. And we first started in 1976 with our first hotel. And now we've grown into a luxury hotel group where we have dozens of hotels under our portfolio. And our global footprint spans 33 hotels, 7 residences, and 23 countries, which we've divided into 3 major operating regions. So in total, this equates to a sizable metric, and it's approximately 7,900 rooms, 12,600 colleagues. And we have a pipeline. So I'm just really qualifying that we understand what it's like to grow from small to a growing hotel chain and all the considerations that you would have to go through. So while we wait for the presentation, I'll dive into explaining the journey that we've embarked. And from basically starting off by doing our due diligence via annual sustainability reports. So every year we would have our reports. We really started to escalate our efforts under our current CEO, James Riley, and his leadership around 4 years ago. And the vision was that we want to make sustainable efforts truly sustainable. And the way for us to do that was to stem from it, not just from top down, but all across our organization. And so alongside our sustainability consultant, Greenview, we created what we call a governance structure, which once we get our presentation up and going, I'll be able to walk you through that. So our foundation exists as operational culture. And we identify them as hotel champions, and they typically include general managers and hotel managers alongside key persons in our hotel teams that either self-identify with a passion to contribute towards sustainability, or they're in roles that naturally facilitate their involvement. It could be a director of engineering, it could be an executive chef. I think the key thing here is that essentially we believe that anybody within our organization can contribute within the space, as long as they have the will. And more importantly, the structure within our hotels is that we should have it well supported by those who are at the helm. So another key pillar within our governance structure that I was describing are what we call working groups. And working groups help us drill down into more detail for smaller, nimble action groups that really take topics and drill into focus. We currently have 8 working groups, and they span a host of topics, including guest engagement, human rights and inclusiveness, and one that I lead myself, which is called food and beverage impact. And basically, as members of these working groups, we're able to work across the organization and create goals that are aligned to help us really drive action across the group. And in the beginning, when we approached the structure of doing working groups, I think we were very eager and ready to get out there and do as much as we could. What we found is it actually became a challenge to really mobilize action, because once we got them up and going, there's only so much resources that can be applied, and sometimes working groups would halt in terms of their ability to mobilize action. So the recommendation here is, whilst there are so many varied topics that you could focus on, it's important to scale back and really start to organize in terms of your priorities. Is it a working group that is fixed? Like, for example, in food and beverage, we're constantly mobilizing action in our division. Or is it something that could be more of a temporary project, such as green development, where we take a look at how we create resources and guidelines for new hotel projects, specifications, and owners' education resources. So that would be something that we cast as temporary, because once those guidelines have been developed, then it's something that we no longer need to have a working group for. So I mentioned that I'm leading the Food and Beverage Impact Group, and it's basically a global team of passionate individuals, and our group involves chefs, we've got F&B managers, procurement officers, and hygiene managers. And so a takeaway is that I've learned from nearly 2.5 years running this group is that it's good to not actually expect 100% participation at all times. And it's more important to really identify your topics and your goals and have members contribute based on as it applies. And you're able to really drive, I think, further action in organizing in this manner. And so in this working group, we report into a leadership council, which is where all of the working group leaders of the 8 that I had aforementioned come together, and we convene quarterly to discuss key actions within our group and update on goals we set and challenges faced. So topics that are left unresolved, as it could happen, and I think it was mentioned in the earlier presentation, we only have certain resources sometimes that we're facing. So it's important that we're able to table with our group where we might require operational support and where we may need to have a host of organizational leaders weigh in on topics. And so at the executive advisory panel level, we have our CEO, CMO, et cetera, and other sustainability advisors, from our consultants to hotel reps, that really help us drive our sustainable leadership strategy across the group. So all of the goals that we establish within these working groups, as well as our MO operational pillars, are all linked to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And I believe that we all generally widely recognize this as a leading benchmark for sustainability efforts. So I'm just gonna pause here and just check in. Were we able to pull up the slide?
Yeah, unfortunately, Iris, we're not able to share because of a permission setting on the document that I received. And so we're not able to from our end. If you might be able to on your end. If you want to give it one more try, we'll take a pause to try.
Okay, sure. So thank you, everybody, for your patience in this era. As you can understand, the challenges sometimes that comes with a virtual format, but unfortunately, this time it's gotten the better of me. But I'd be happy to share the slides I've been prepared to go alongside with my presentation. And I'll just keep trucking along here, just being cognizant of time. But I want to spend a little more time really talking about sustainability objectives that we have in the group, and then how we apply them in food and beverage division to really drive further action for our division. So there's 4 key focus points that we have in sustainability across the group for 2020 and beyond. We're looking at single-use plastic, which has been a major undertaking for our group because we made it a public commitment to eliminate single-use plastics in all areas by March 2021, which is next year. We're also looking at responsible procurement, which involves the process of how we source and review suppliers and ultimately decide on making purchases that are aligned to our eco goals. And in the past year, we've really managed to advance with our group framework. We're also looking at waste management and social inclusion and areas where we're encouraging, at minimum, an innovative solution per hotel to address the concern of reducing waste toward more circular economy thinking. And then it also involves our colleagues and community and how we can empower it in more meaningful projects. So thank you so much, Eric. You're the best. I can see he's now been able to pull up my presentation, which is brilliant. So yeah, that's the slide that I wanted to share. Driving into single-use plastic and how we've done this in food and beverage. We started the process over 2 years ago, and how do we do this? Well, we literally sat there in this working group and we reviewed all the items in our front of house and our back of house areas in our operations, and we took all those single-use plastics and we identified them, classified them into 3 key phases. We use what we like to call a traffic light system: green, yellow, and red. And green items were generally items that have equal alternatives in the market. They are our low-hanging fruits and include items like takeaway packaging, straws, etc., where in the market we do see that there are already equal alternatives. And so we classified that as something that could be eliminated essentially immediately. Secondly, in this group of 60-odd items that we identified, we had yellow phase items. And these items, we realized, they require some time to explore alternatives. And alternatives might not already be readily available, or we actually require some internal testing. Items like cling film, vacuum bags, piping bags. For those familiar with food and beverage operations, you'll understand what I mean. And these items require cooking and food safety requirements that need to be fulfilled. And so it required some time for us to review alternatives and do some in-house testing. We also believe that in-house water bottling is another initiative that we can really get behind, because it's a great way for us to get rid of plastic water bottles and also lower our carbon footprint across our hotels. And so finally, what are red phase items? Well, red phase items, using red, are the items that we found will take the longest time. And they take the longest time because they may require commitment beyond just our organization. It will take a commitment externally, such as when we take a look at suppliers and the packaging that they're using. And unfortunately, when they come into our hotels, oftentimes they come in plastic. And so we recognize that this would take not just mobilizing efforts within our own organization, but something that we would require commitment out there with our suppliers and within our industry. So as we get closer to March 2021, I'm going to highlight that it's certainly been a challenge to look at yellow phase and red phase especially. And those items started to become more complex when we realized there are terms that may not be regulated in the industry and have become quite popular. We're looking at terms like degradable, biodegradable, compostable, etc. And so how are we going to help our hotel teams navigate through all of these green terms that are coming up? And so there, in the beginning, it wasn't easy, and we were getting emails back and forth and jumping on calls and meeting with our hotel teams. And finally, we were able, in our working group, to create guidelines for all of these items, and what we call a plastic guideline, where we list best alternatives for an item, next best alternatives, and not acceptable alternatives. And this really helped guide our hotel teams as they went through each items that they were reviewing on how they could possibly whittle down. And so this is something that I think is important to share, because other challenges I see, and I feel it's a call of action on my part, having looked at this with our hotel group for some time now, is that there continues to be items that we can see that it's now not a lack of identifying an alternative, it's just the sheer fact that one, we may be facing regional differences and infrastructures that support breaking down of these eco alternatives. So there may be bioplastics, but the region or the city that you're in doesn't have the facility to break it down. So you're still creating a waste problem. The other thing that's important to talk about is the fact that we're looking at premiums of 10 times, 12 times, 20 times their plastic counterpart. We're in operations. We understand that it's not as easy of swapping in an alternative and then taking that big hike. And so the call to action I'm asking for is for, after this session, you've heard what I've had to share. I'd love it if you wanted to connect, because I think we're all in this together. If we want to see eco cling film become something that we are all using as a normal part of our business, we need to make sure it's not costing 20 times that it is right now. And I'm sure we're going to have a greater adoption rate if we're able to achieve this. And so we need to be creating that demand in the industry and helping our suppliers get enough interest in it so that they're able to bring those prices down so it can be truly sustained. I've said enough about plastic. I want to go on to responsible procurement. And with responsible procurement, single-use plastics is just one of the spokes. We're talking about how we purchase in general. And in food and beverage, especially, as you can recognize, it is something that we generally are the largest purchasers in the hotel, if not one of the largest. And so what we approached initially were initiatives that were more in silos. We wanted to make sure we were sourcing coffee responsibly, tea, cocoa, vanilla, etc. But what we found in this exchange was there was a lot of single hand back and forth, especially at the size that we're operating in and when we don't have a central purchasing division. And so there was a lot of dialogue back and forth about, is this the right alternative? Can we accept the certification, etc. And so one of the things I'm particularly proud of having achieved within our group is creating alongside our working group a responsible procurement guideline, which really is helping us drive a lot of our purchasing considerations into a normal practice that we have with our suppliers. How we review, what are certifications we accept? If there aren't certifications because they're a smaller supplier, how can we approach that? And so these are things that I think that in terms of a framework, if you take the time to build it out, it's going to help you mobilize a lot of action. So at this point, I'm getting a little bell that tells me that my time is up. But I'm really interested to talk more about these topics. So please feel free to reach out to me and connect on LinkedIn afterwards, because I think that collaboration is really the key in terms of helping us really advance and make this something that we can make a normal part of hospitality eco-solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. And that was obviously a great and in-depth presentation on some of the various initiatives you have. Really appreciated the honest take on some of the challenges with getting it across an organization, as well as the call to initiative for collaboration and getting scale, which is what we generally need in the industry. So now with that, I want to actually turn it over to Kunim to talk more specifically in Centara and how you have that same approach and how to roll things out across a portfolio and how to engage across the entire company, which has various hotels and various departments. So turn it over to Kunim.
Hi, hello everyone. Can you hear me well? Thanks, Eric. And it's such a pleasure and pressure for me at the same time, as this is my first time speaking at PHIST and also on behalf of Centara Hotel and Resort. So thank you very much for having me today. This class is about corporate sustainability, and I would like to share quickly the 3 key approaches that we emphasize in our operations. I also would like to share the images that you may find some of them entertaining while listening to me instead of looking in my face. So give me 1 second. All right, I hope you can see my screen now. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So first is the education. I'm not talking about education degree or anything like that. I mean, how much the hotel staff know or understand about sustainability. Do they know what sustainability really is, including the definition of it? Isn't the turning the lights off or segregation waste enough to be sustainable? And why do they have to do these things besides it is the right thing to do or because their bosses say so? So they will do as they are told to do no matter what, but we need them to really understand from the core why they have to do it. And when they truly understand and buy in, they will then be creative, operating in their own unique way and deliver the results that we are looking for. We can't deny using resources for business growth. Therefore, cultivating good consciousness, being aware of the global challenges and what our Mother Earth is facing at the moment, understanding the negative impact the hotel operations cause to the environment, and knowing how to operate sustainably is very important. These are the basic things that the team needs to really understand. It's about people knowing their responsibilities and being responsible for their action. That definitely has an impact on more or less on the environment. Our rooms are nice, but doesn't matter if the environment is being destroyed. And second is practical system to help shape our operations, and given the numbers of properties under our watch, there's no way we will work things out effectively without any system in place. And that system has to be practical to make our data most reliable and usable for ourselves and for the industry. Then to transform the output into practices for improvement. This is something that will give us directions, help us track, manage, and benchmark our data against our past performance and compare with peers. This is not a competition, of course, but I can say that no matter how many initiatives, projects, events you implement, if you don't have a good management system in place, and if you don't measure what you are doing, the action wouldn't be different than making the effort to do something good, but didn't expect anything in return. And third is about engagement. Engagement, it is natural that we want to create something great to make a good impact. And when it comes to sustainability, this is definitely not a one-person job. There is no need to talk about complex stuff at all, starting with something simple or something that's currently in place. Does everyone know how many types of energy they are utilizing at their properties? Do they know how many type of waste they are generating and how these waste get disposed of? Do they know about all this stuff? Or is their wastewater treatment plant working effectively before discharge? Get those things right first, and then you can go beyond CSR events. There's a link to sustainability in everything we do, but not everyone can see this through. So it is important for the knowledge to be passed on from the key people down to the remaining members of the team. Get it going efficiently through both internal communication and drive staff engagement through strong collaboration in order to make tangible results. And last for me, I told you in the beginning, is it going to be a quick sharing for me? So last for me, in this pandemic and unforeseen or yet predictable circumstances for the tourism and hospitality industry, it is a challenging time for sure, and no one has any doubt about it, especially when the economy strongly drives decision-making at the moment. But please do not forget, it is not the apocalypse either. So there's still hope and long-term value for us to focus on and to look forward to. We do not yet consider ourselves as one of the leaders in sustainability, but we want to be known as one of the hotel groups who make the least impact on the environment. And this is our story to tell. Thank you, Eric. I can't hear you.
It's like my sixth session, and one of these I'm going to learn to unmute myself. Thank you, Nim. And if I could, that was fantastic, and really like how you drove it home on engagement across the organization and need to focus on that from the bottom up. If I could welcome the other panelists back on for the next 10 minutes, I'd love to have some follow-up discussion. All right. Now, I know Shankar was in a budget meeting today. There we go. Let's see if we can have Shankar back on. Thank you, Shankar. All right. So a couple of things that you take away from this. First is the multi-dimensional aspect or wearing multiple hats across the organization. That's what I get a sense from everyone on the panel today is the ability and need to you don't just have one title and one thing you're doing, but you have several that you have to do. So first to Shankar, in terms of how does that play out in terms of your organization? Is that something that you have to do for sustainability, or is that sort of natural the way you have to liaise with various departments and wear different hats across your organization?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, our organization is a bit of a hybrid because we are equity and managed, and we have very successful equity properties which contribute to a significant amount of our cash flow. So in every single function, at least in the corporate division of ONYX, we do have to wear at one point in time an equity hat and one point in time a managed estate hat. And when I closed my presentation, purely because I was running out of time, but the expansion I wanted to do was it's very, very important for us to understand what we are true to our equity properties. And if we have an environmental or a socially responsible culture that we can present to our owners, they understand it, they want to imbibe it, and we have Thai owners which culturally do actually embrace this concept, it just becomes easier for us to then wear the second hat of being the managers and explain that as opposed to just a couple of bullet points on the presentation. We have tangible examples on flow-through, which obviously involve high capex or high investment. However, in the longer term, the returns do come on two aspects. One is an efficient running asset, and two, an efficient return on the customer journey, because the customers are also asking for that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yes, the owner-operator hat is one I think that many share in the same growing hotel companies moving toward asset light. But hopefully that's something that's giving you a little bit of advantage. And the way you talked about some of the more technical services aspects of the portfolio was great. Then question to Iris on this multiple hats. So first is you had actually a great graphic that we'll hopefully be able to share through PHA, but you have a structure internally at Mandarin of working groups, of committees, and so forth. But it seems like those are all made up of people in the organization who have other jobs and other things to do. So could you comment a little on how that comes together, and are there positives of that to how you're able to get things done? You.
I've committed the theme.
Now, yes, you're good.
You're absolutely right. We're all wearing multiple hats in terms of responsibilities. But what I like to liken to it is sustainability is actually something that we are all able to participate towards, and actually we should all care about. And so it's actually quite natural that it becomes a part of everybody's responsibilities across the organization. I think in the beginning, there's growing pains because you need to create that culture. And so that's why I wanted to share about the sustainability governance that we put together, and how even in the beginning, we were ready to race forwards, but we forgot that perhaps parts of the organization was still just cluing in to what we were trying to achieve here. And so once you establish a framework, really, I think when you go out there and you speak to people across your organization, inherently, people want to do the right thing. They want to do good and they want to contribute. And sustainability is one of those topics that everybody who has the will has an ability to make a difference. And so it's really key that I think you spend the time to build that foundation. And I think especially with hotel operations and groups, that comes from the heart, right? That comes from our colleagues in the hotels and having a structure in place there so that it's not a top-down approach that we're trying to drill from a corporation.
Fantastic, great. And actually, so to Nim, similar question then, because you have done a lot of focus on engagement and education at the properties. And so was that more difficult in the beginning, and has there been some strides in it? Is it getting any easier, or is it still a challenge to really educate and engage for performance?
I would say that is the charm of driving sustainability. And we are living in a reality. Of course, nothing comes easy, but good things take time. So we have to put a lot of effort. And I think education is still the main thing, because we can tell people what to do, but whether they understand why they have to do it. And we wouldn't get any good result or what we are looking for if they don't understand, but if they just do as they are told to do. Yeah.
Very good. Final question to everyone. Let's see if there are any other. Okay, final question to everyone. First Shankar, then Iris, Nims. Again, all of you have fairly robust pipelines, right, of growth. And so there is the existing portfolio of managing, and then there's the future portfolio. And so could you comment, I know this has already been mentioned a little bit, but how you embed or what you look to do for the pipeline in terms of design, operations, talent, location, and how that may play in, because you do have a lot of that focus to implement your same platform across an ever-growing portfolio. So first to Shankar.
Yeah, I think there is obviously an ambition to grow the pipeline, but there is no pressure to grow the pipeline. I know everyone is focused on this race of growing development. A lot of it comes from the share market, a lot of it comes from the economies of how the world works. From an ONYX Hospitality Group perspective, yes, we want to grow, but we want to grow with the right partners. And the right partnership just does not depend upon the P&L and the efficiency of the GOP. The right partnership depends upon a cultural association, because a management contract can last for 20 years. So for us, the core of it is to find the right people who understand what we stand for as a company. Firstly, and everyone who comes to us looks at our equity performance and our equity culture. And when they understand the fact that the core of our equity hotels is running sound, it's far more easier for them to adapt their ways of coming into our pipeline, because not everyone is a hotelier. So for us, we are actually quite passionate about choosing the right partnership over growing the pipeline. Mute.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I love to hear that, especially since the partnership. Then if you're putting sustainability into discussions, that fits into the right partnership. So that's great to hear. Thank you. And then Iris, now also to pick on you a little bit, because Mandarin has also had some acquisitions recently, where suddenly there's a new hotel to take over with an F&B operation. So could you sort of comment on the growth and that kind of operation?
Sure. I mean, we've recently taken over a mega project in Abu Dhabi that you may be familiar with. And so it's been an interesting experience because I think there's definitely opportunity to take all the initiatives that are created in our operational space and really format them into topics that you can present even at the stage of deal making, right? When there's prospective owners and getting them on board that this is something that's part of Mandarin's brand. And then really having those packages ready in terms of solutions. And a really good example is how we approach in-house water bottling. And that's something that even at design stage, once we're at a new hotel project, we're able to send over standard operating procedures, recommendations of who they could use, points of contact, best practices. This kind of thing I think is really helpful in terms of mobilizing these efforts in your new builds and really getting that part that translated across the new hotel projects.
Thank you. Fascinating, and that's great to hear the ability to transfer the knowledge and even the technical parts. Now, Nim, same question to you, and also to your part. How do you keep up with all of this work?
Can I say I can't? No, I'm joking, right? I have to say I'm joking. So I just have to keep trying, physically and mentally, being more and more sustainable and pass the knowledge. It takes time and effort for sure. And I'm just going to keep going back to the education because growing our pipeline, and some is our managed properties and some is our own properties. And with the managed properties, our owners can be communicated through the GMs. So it's not only the hotel staff that need to really understand to the core why we had to implement sustainability and environmental program. The GM is also very important, or the key person that is probably the first person in line that they have to truly understand. So they can convey the message to the owners so they understand our structure about sustainability, because we can't expect them to understand everything in sustainability, the elements, right? So we can't bombarding them with compliance, the energy saving, water, waste management, So we just have the GM to buy in, and then we put the right structure for them to follow. So yeah, that's the way to go. Yes.
Well, thank you. And I think a couple of motifs then, the biggest being the need to engage your owners and engage your partners in this, which, as we know in this industry, that was kind of swept under the rug for a few decades, and it was only focused on the operations. But the final one, and I wanted to close with this, is that we would always talk on property how you need to find those passionate champions on property. But I think the lesson I've taken from this group in this masterclass is find the passionate people at the corporate level also, regardless of their position, and get them involved, because that's what's going to do it. And you three have really demonstrated that easily to PHIST and to the group. And so, look, really thank you for your knowledge, your sharing, and look forward to seeing how the portfolios and sustainability programs grow over the years for your respective organizations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.